During the 1950s, masculinity was thought of as a necessary component to fighting communism, and homosexuality was thought of as the complete lack of it. Historian K.A. Cordileone calls the great emphasis on masculinity that took place during this time the cult of masculinity. Cold War Americans knew that they had an enemy, and that enemy wanted to fight them at home. Because of this Cold War mentality, a strong emphasis was put on masculinity. American men had to be extremely patriotic and mentally strong enough to stick to their guns when faced with the question of communism. As a result of this strong emphasis on masculinity, strict gender rules were put in place for men. As historian Michael Snyder points out, all men had to have short hair, good posture, a firm handshake, and an intolerance of anything but strict heterosexuality.
Perhaps the first person to cause panic about homosexuality in Cold War America was biologist Alfred Kinsey with his 1948 book Sexual Behavior in the Human Male. In this publication, Kinsey claimed that 37% of the male population has at least one experience of homosexual contact that resulted in an orgasm.
He also claimed that up to 50% of the male population who remained unmarried until the age of 35 have had homosexual experiences that resulted in orgasm. And perhaps the most alarming statistic for the average American parent during the time of the Cold War, Kinsey claims that at least 60% of pre-adolescent boys engage in homosexual activities.
And so, Mr. Kinsey scared the crap out of people. Honorable as his intentions may have been, the effect of Kinsey's work was mostly negative. It is safe to say that Sexual Behavior in the Human Male was the match that sparked the first fears of homosexuality in Cold War America.
After Senator Joseph McCarthy claimed that the State Department was riddled with card-carrying communist and security risks such as homosexuals, the public response was astounding.
Although McCarthy himself was most concerned with the supposed communist bombardment of the State Department, the populace was more concerned with the 91 sexual perverts who were emasculating the government from within.
Prior to the year 1973, the American Psychological Association classified homosexuality as a mental illness. The American people found it alarming that the only thing standing in between them and a communist takeover were a bunch of mentally ill effeminates, incapable of psychologically defending themselves from the insidious Reds.
In February of 1950, Senator Joseph McCarthy famously claimed that 205 card-carrying communists were working within the State Department. Soon after, a significantly less famous statement was made by the Deputy Undersecretary. In the statement, he downplayed the accusation that communists had infiltrated the State Department, but he admitted that a number of security risks had been forced out and included 91 homosexuals. By 1960, the State Department alone had fired more than 1,000 employees for being homosexual, and that does not count the employees who were just asked to resign. Statistics indicate that the State Department firings represented about 20% of the total. With this in mind, a rough estimate about 5,000 would be more accurate. Nonetheless, one can assume that the number of federal employees fired for being a homosexual numbered well into the thousands.
The early Medici Society concerned itself with the political problems that affected the rights of homosexuals. The leader of the society, Harry Hay, himself claimed that the government purges were directly responsible for him starting the organization. He claimed that gays were nothing more than an unfortunate scapegoat for the government. He believed that homosexuals inherited the scapegoat status by default, by the unfortunate happenings of history.
The government simply needed another minority group to place blame on, because the blacks were already too organized and radical, and the repression of Jews would be conjured up by connotations of all too recent policies of Nazi Germany. Martha Shelley, a participant in one of the protests that took place during the 5-day period after Stonewall, claimed that the Gay Liberation Front, the GLF, was formed as a result of the organized protests that happened after Stonewall.
In 1973, progress was finally made when homosexuality was taken off the American Psychological Association's list of mental disorders.
Yay!
In the 1980s, homosexuality was unfortunately defined by the AIDS epidemic. Unfortunately, because of this, throughout the 1980s, homosexual rights continued to be a struggle.
However, In 1999, the High Court in Vermont decided that same-sex couples were entitled to marriage-like benefits and protections, but it did not require them to be eligible for marriage licenses. Even though they were not given equal rights as heterosexual couples, it was a gigantic leap for the gay and lesbian community. And even back in 1996, the Supreme Court of the U.S. ruled against the case of Romer versus Evans as an amendment in the Colorado Constitution that would have prevented any region in the state to take any action to protect homosexual citizens from discrimination.
As a result, there have been actions taken to decrease and increase gay rights. The gay community was overjoyed when Massachusetts became the 6th jurisdiction in the world, not to mention the first state in the United States to legalize gay marriages.
And although it took some time, in 2004 one state finally decided to give homosexuals marriage rights. California also granted same-sex marriage in June of 2008, but it was removed in 2008 of November due to Proposition 8. The state has added a new section to the Constitution that restricts marriage between a man and a woman only. So it's making an effort of pushing for gay marriages.